Hello everyone and welcome to the channel. We talk a lot on this channel about estate sales, spring cleaning, and people downsizing their homes. But there is one specific type of curbside pile that every veteran treasure hunter knows is the most lucrative and the most chaotic, is the angry clean out. When a relationship ends badly and someone wants their ex's belongings out of the house immediately, logic completely disappears. They aren't carefully checking pockets, they aren't inspecting boxes, and they certainly aren't calling appraisers. They're just throwing things to the curb as fast as humanly possible. Today's story is exactly about that. Meet Kristin. She is 45 years old, a regular office worker grinding through the daily 9-to-5 corporate routine. It was a miserable, drizzly Tuesday morning. She was stuck in slow-moving traffic, sipping lukewarm coffee, completely dreading the mountain of emails waiting for her at the desk. She didn't know it yet, but she was about to be 2 hours late to work today, and the very last thing she would pull from the wet grass, a completely shattered piece of office decor, was hiding a secret so heavy it would make her boss's anger completely irrelevant. Kristin's daily commute took her through a very affluent, get-it-style suburban neighborhood. As she was inching along the wet road, watching her dashboard clock aggressively tick closer to 9 a.m., she saw a massive, sprawling mess on the curb outside a sprawling modern mansion. It was the undeniable aftermath of a rapid, painful split. There were expensive hard-shell suitcases thrown wide open, designer clothes spilling onto the damp grass, framed pictures shoved haphazardly into cardboard boxes, and heavy pieces of furniture practically tossed on the top of each other. Guys, what would you do if you saw something like it on the street like that? Would you just come and, start digging? Can you please share your thoughts? Because I'm not sure what I would do. I mean, probably I would want to, but something would just hold me, back from it. I'm not sure. It was a completely disaster zone. Kristin looked at the clock again. She was already pushing it, and she had a stressful morning meeting to prepare for. But a loud, undeniable instinct in her gut screamed at her to pull over. She hit her blinker, parked her car illegally near a fire hydrant, and told herself she was just going to look for exactly 1 minute. Kristin stepped out in the crisp morning air, her work heels sinking slightly into the damp earth. The energy of the mess was almost overwhelming. She started carefully sifting through a pile of discarded coats and sweaters. Suddenly, she spotted an old, scuffed wooden jewelry box trapped under the leg of a heavy oak dining chair. She tried to pull it out, but the chair was wedged tight against a pile of boxes. Kristin had to grab the chair with both hands, ruining her manicure, and heave it sideways just to free the small box. She popped the lid open. At first glance, it was a massive disappointment, just a tangled mess of cheap 90s costume jewelry, peeling fake pearls, and plastic earrings, but as she dug her fingers through the junk, she felt something completely different at the bottom. It was a massive, incredibly heavy metal bracelet. It was hopelessly tangled in a mess of cheap fishing line necklaces. I don't know, guys, if you could tell if it's fake, is it plastic, or is it real, but it would take me some, time to figure it out, so I'm not sure how she could figure it out like that. I would just thought that everything is gold there or everything is silver there. Kristin didn't have time to untangle it. She practically ripped the cheap chains apart to free the heavy metal piece. She turned it over in the morning sunlight. Stamped into the back of the thick metal was a very strange, intricate geometric hallmark she had never seen before. It didn't look like a mold jewelry, it looked like architectural art. Trusting her gut, she slipped the heavy bracelet into her purse just in case. She moved to the next section of the pile, glancing nervously at her illegal parked car. Shoved under a stack of crushed, wet Amazon boxes was a worn, dark brown leather portfolio folder. Very mysterious. Just as Kristin reached down to grab the leather folder, she heard a loud bang. The heavy oak front door of the mansion swung wide open. Kristin froze, her heart hammering in her chest. A man in an expensive but wrinkled suit stepped out on the porch, yelling furiously into his cell phone. Kristin immediately crouched down behind a pile of boxes, her pencil skirt soaking up the wet grass. If he saw her picking through the pile, he might call the police, or worse, take his anger out on her. I would just, be scared to death. If I saw someone came out of a house that I'm, digging the trash pile, I would be immediately somewhere already 500 miles away from that place. Trying to stay completely silent, she unzipped the leather folder while hiding behind the trash. Insane. Inside was a chaotic mess of old legal documents and expired passports, but tucked into the very back sleeve was a thick manila envelope. Kristin peeked inside and saw a stack of physical stock certificates dated from the late 1990s. The company name was vague, some obscure early tech or software company she didn't immediately recognize. Most people would assume that physical paper stocks from 30 years ago were completely void and worthless, but Kristin worked in a corporate office. She knew paper, and the paper these certificates were printed on was serious. It had that crisp, heavy feel of federal currency, complete with complex watermarks and intricate intaglio printing. You don't print garbage on paper this expensive. Holding her breath, she carefully slid the envelope into her work towel just as the man slammed his front door shut again. Guys, I would not really touch anything if I saw someone coming out of the house. Please let me know what do you think about this situation. What would you do? I wouldn't even touch that envelope or that folder. I would just, run, and she could basically still be hiding, seeing a man coming out and still trying to dig something from there. I would just probably come to man and ask him, what is all this? Maybe he needs his stuff back, his documents back at least. Kristin scrambled to her feet. That was too close. She was officially late, her clothes were damp, and she needed to get back in her car immediately. She turned around to sprint to her vehicle, but her heel clipped something hard hidden in the grass. Sitting half-buried under a black garbage bag was a heavy executive desk lamp. The green glass shade had been completely shattered, leaving razor-sharp sharps everywhere. Kristin reached down, grabbing it by the thick brass neck, intending to toss it closer to the curb so it wouldn't pop her tire when she backed out. But as she lifted it, the physics felt entirely wrong. The base of the lamp was shockingly heavy. It weighed at least 15 pounds, and she tilted it sideways to clear the curb. She heard it. Thud, clack, a dull, heavy shifting sound coming directly from the hollow inside of the metal base. Something incredibly dense was trapped inside. What do you think was trapped inside? Some coins, some more papers, maybe some jewelries. Kristin didn't go to work. She threw the heavy lamp into the trunk of her car, drove straight back to her apartment, and practically ran into her kitchen. She grabbed a Phillips head screwdriver from her junk drawer, her hand shaking so hard with adrenaline she could barely hold the tool. She flipped the heavy lamp upside down her kitchen counter. The screws on the bottom were oiled and stripped, forcing her to pry the felt-covered metal plate off with the edge of a butter knife. As the metal plate finally snapped loose, a dusty, tightly bound clothes package fell out, hitting the granite counter with a heavy metallic clatter. Kristin held her breath and untied the thick fabric. Inside, stacked in neat, heavy rows, were dozens of flawless, solid gold coins. I think I was right. Real, undeniable, pure gold bullion, Krugerrands, and American Eagles that someone had desperately hidden away, and an angry ex had unknowingly thrown straight into the trash. I would be so angry at the person, at the ex, if he or she would throw such things of mine away. The appraisals over the next few weeks completely turned Kristin's world upside down. The cheap bracelet from the jewelry box, it was a highly sought-after, limited edition, brutalist designer piece from 1970s, instantly bought by a private collector for over $4,000. The old stock certificates, they weren't void at all. They were uncashed early-stage founder shares of a tech startup that had since been acquired and folded into one of today's multi-billion-dollar tech giants. The payout on the paper alone was staggering, and the gold coins were the ultimate hidden fortune, worth tens of thousands of dollars on the spot market. Guys, she just took it from the house that was still, the people are still there. For some reason, I don't know. I wouldn't touch it, really. I wouldn't touch it. I would just bring everything back to the house and to that man. I don't know. Kristin did eventually make it to the office that Tuesday. She walked in exactly 2 hours late, her shoes slightly muddy. Her boss was furious, standing by her desk and demanding to know where she had been. But Kristin just sat down in her rolling chair, looked at her computer screen, and smiled a very quiet, very wealthy smile. Of course. She walked into the office with a completely new understanding of the world. She realized that sometimes the universe puts a chaotic pile of trash in your path for a very specific reason, and there is absolutely no such thing as an accidental stop. I mean, yeah, but still, I don't know, guys. I mean, that's the end of the story. But I do feel kind of weird. I don't feel right about the story because she could just, I mean, she just take something that belonged to a person and that person was just right in front of her. I don't know. Please give me your thoughts. Leave a comment. What do you think about this whole story and this whole situation? And please, if you like the video, if you like the story, give me the thumbs up and subscribe. And see you next time. Bye.